It sure is nice to come home at the end of a long day and enjoy a podcast. But you know what makes the experience that much better? Relaxing with a few puffs of smoke from my McQueen pipe. At McQueenPipes.com, I was able to find the perfect smoking pipe to suit my nerdy, yet dignified sensibilities. I especially love that each pipe is designed and handcrafted by a true artisan, and that all of their pipes are inspired by fantasy books and movies like The Lord of the Rings. Being a bit of a hobbit myself, my pipe is called the Barrel Rider, but they've also got pipes for wizards, rangers, dragon riders, or even goblins. If pipe tobacco isn't your thing, no worries. McQueen Pipes has got you covered with attachments for vaping or even cannabis. Head on over to McQueenPipes.com and use the code BIOGRAPHERS at checkout to receive 15% off of your entire order. Go ahead, treat your nerdy heart to something you'll cherish and enjoy your podcast listening experience in style with a McQueen pipe. That's Mac like mac and cheese and Queen like the band. McQueenPipes.com and use the code BIOGRAPHERS at checkout for a 15% discount on your whole order. Cheers, everyone, and happy podcasting.
I do hope you can see me today from where you are.
Ich bin ein Feeling.
If I'm generally anything, I guess I'm generally miserable.
This modern world of science and invention is of particular interest to women.
The people, I would say, there is no patent. This is... Would you patent the sun?
I regard myself as a soldier, though a soldier of peace.
Welcome to the Biographers.
Sneakers with the tongues pulled out, baggy pants, and like an Element t-shirt. And I remember I wore that and I thought I looked so dope. I thought it looked so cool. I looked at myself in the mirror and I always used to say this when I was a kid. I was like, I look dangerous. I thought that was cool.
Danger is my middle name.
Literally. And I go up to my biological father, who in the middle of the recession probably was not thinking about this. And he turns to me as I entered the apartment that we were living in Richmond, and he goes, "Son, you look hip-hop hippin'." And I never wore that outfit again. That was enough to just annihilate all ego, all shred. So it was just polos and slacks for me for the rest of my life.
See, I do appreciate
Hip-hop
that,
hippin'?
though. I appreciate that because I think it's a thing that happens when you get to be an adult that you
Oh, yes, I did this with the boys,
yes,
of course.
You want to pinpoint the thing that will make the teenager the most annoyed with you, and you're going to lean into it.
Yes.
So for my dad, for example, he would never say teenagers, teeny boppers.
Oh no!
So it'd be like, oh yeah, you and all your teeny bopper friends want to go and do this or whatever. And it was one of those. It was like, grown,
Yeah.
So yeah, I kind of appreciate
because
that.
he's trying to swat that down. That's what I did with my little brothers. My little brother Tony was in a phase where he just had so much ennui that he did not care what he was looking like. So it was always just gigantic sweaty sweatshirt and basketball shorts and Crocs. And I would give him so much crap about the Crocs because they're in style again. What happened? I thought we got rid of these.
No, they were never cool, kids.
They were never cool.
And I don't know how you've gotten into this mind frame that
unless you're a line cook, you are not allowed to wear Crocs.
I agree. I think they're hideous. Whenever they get slightly dirty, they look 10 times worse than any other shoe that you can wear.
So true.
So they just look disgusting. I'm sorry, people. I know that I'm going to get some hate for this because you're let the kids wear what they want, and they can. If they're this idiot old dude thinks I'm dumb, then I don't really care. That's great. But for me personally, I'm sorry. There is no planet or universe that exists where Crocs are cool. They're the lamest shoe that you can possibly wear.
You can maybe wear them around the house if you don't go outside a whole lot.
If you're at the beach or at a lake house, I'll allow it. But
if you work in a kitchen.
Or if you work in a kitchen. But even then, I wouldn't recommend that because
even
if you
then, wear the
some,
clogs.
yeah, exactly. Because if you have some grease on your shoes, they're going through the holes in your Crocs.
It's true.
And right onto your socks. So what's even the point? Well, hey, everyone. Welcome to The Biographers. I'm Daniel Newman, and with me is Akiva Miola, the goth.
Hello, that's me. I'm so dark and mysterious.
Before we get into really any of the kind of pre-show announcements here or whatever, I'll say up front for everybody, if you're listening and you're going, Akiva sounds a little muffled,
yeah,
I'll let you explain.
So the reason being is right now we're at Daniel's house and I'm masked up because my sister, unfortunately, is dealing with some chronic illness stuff and has very luckily been allowed to get into a clinical study here soon. And I'm going to be taking care of her in a couple of weeks. So in a very similar sense with anybody who has severe chronic illness, I have to like make sure I'm 100% nice and clean when I go over to her house so I don't get her infected with her 8th COVID infection or something like that.
Yeah.
So I'm just making sure we're staying clean. I apologize for the muffle. I hope it's not too much of an inconvenience.
I don't hear much of it, honestly, even like in my headphones right now, hearing you come through the microphone. So
my giant nose is a good barrier, so my mouth isn't touching up against the mask.
No, it really, I can barely even tell. So hopefully nobody else can tell. But if anybody hears like a whooshy noise against the microphone or something, his mask might touch it briefly or something like that. But anyways, if anybody was curious going, what is this? This sounds a little bit maybe muffled or there's a scratchy noise or whatever. That's the reason why. So just wanted to let y'all know up front. But again, I don't think it'll be much of an issue because I don't hear a whole lot.
Okay.
But a couple of pre-show, I guess I don't even know what to call them, announcements or just really things to shout out like we always do. First and foremost, if anybody out there is enjoying this show, we like to always give a quick little plug for our Patreon page. We're trying to make this obviously into more of a full-time career as of now. This is basically pro bono. This is, we have some, a few Patreon fans, a few supporters that are sending us some cash and everything like that. But again, it's not exactly able to pay all the bills. So if anybody is able to support us through our Patreon, as of now, we just have $5 and $10 tiers. So if you feel like this show is contributing positively to your life and you want to show some support, it'd be greatly appreciated.
Most definitely.
Second thing is we're going to be launching our Kickstarter here. Probably, I said last time, well, probably this week, and I didn't do it just because I had some family in town and everything like that. So I just didn't get around to doing it. So we're going to be launching that probably this month, within the next week or so, I would imagine, unless we decide on something else. But go check that out if you can. That's just going to be patreon.com/profile/thebiographers.
Yeah, it would really help to get us started up, put some money into advertising and equipment and getting us set up so that we can maybe possibly do this full time, get enough ears to listen so we can sustain ourselves.
Yeah. And it's been pretty encouraging so far. We've put very little into advertising or anything like that. We've had a pretty overwhelming response so far for listeners.
Yeah, all things considered, we've grown naturally quite a bit.
Yeah. I've been looking into some advertising things and I've seen people that have said they've put in, $1,000+ a month into advertising and they've managed to get to
where we are now.
Not even a tenth of where we're at now. They're like, we got 200 downloads this month and we're doing easily 10 times that per month. So we're doing okay. And we're hopefully going to be growing more and more and more and more. But obviously any support we could get from y'all who are listening, we'd be very, very grateful.
Yes.
We ready to go?
Let's do it.
All right. So let's get into Franz Liszt Part 3 without any more delays. So in our last episode, we saw Franz Liszt truly come into his own as a musical artist after witnessing a violin performance by Niccolò Paganini, which inspired him to reinvent what it meant to play the piano.
The devil's violinist.
Yeah, just as Paganini had done so with the violin. Now, Franz also had his outlook shifted on what music could be after hearing the Symphonie Fantastique by Hector Berlioz. As a result of witnessing the amazing work of both Paganini and Berlioz, Franz entered a phase of reinvention, which in turn catapulted his career into a realm of stardom. Though his rock star persona had yielded quite a few amorous affairs, Franz had given up his philandering after meeting and falling in love with the Countess Marie de Gault. Though Marie was still married, they continued on with their relationship, which eventually led to Marie becoming pregnant with Franz's baby. The two had their first child together, Blandine, after running away together to Geneva. But where we left off last time, Marie had just given birth to their second daughter, Cosima, while the two were on vacation in Lake Como, Italy. For an age check, this would now make Franz 26 years old and Marie 31. Now, because Marie was still technically married to her first husband, Charles, once again, the couple had to falsify information on Cosima's birth certificate relating to her birth mother. As a refresher, law at the time stated that a child could only have one legal father, and that would default to the woman's husband if she had one. So if Marie wrote down her name on the birth certificate, Cosima would legally be Charles de Gault's daughter.
Gotcha. Okay.
So again, and this is going to play in a little bit later on. I don't think it's in this episode. I think it's in the next, but it's an important little fact to remember that really the kids that they have together legally do not belong to Marie. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, weird law, I know. As was also customary for wealthy people at the time, Cosima, like her sister Blandine before her, was handed over to a wet nurse to be raised. This was actually pretty common practice at the time, as it allowed the parents to go live their lives without the extra burden of a child to raise. So they really weren't around them a whole lot. Franz and Marie continued to travel through Italy and eventually settled for a time in Venice, though Marie reportedly hated everything about the city and especially hated the rich people that she was forced to hang out with. And this is Venice.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Who hates Venice?
I know. Also, isn't she also an obnoxious rich person at this point?
Oh, so check this out, okay? In her diary, Marie wrote at the time, quote, "I have met the Countess Policastro. She's ugly and seems not to have the wit that normally comes with ugliness."
What is... Okay. Hater.
She's
just straight up a hater.
She's like, oh, she's unattractive, but I normally like unattractive people because they have wit, but this person just doesn't.
I'm imagining like the burn book in Mean Girls. She is a fugly
She's
skank.
a Regina for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Maria's a Regina. That is a good call. Now, from what I've read, Marie seems to be a very particular person and fairly hard to please. No matter what Franz did or how hard he tried, nothing seemed to make her happy. But in March of 1838, tragedy struck in Hungary after torrential rain caused massive flooding of the Danube River, which subsequently caused some dams to break, flooding many Hungarian towns and villages. The disaster claimed over 150 lives, and it was said that entire towns were swallowed up by the tsunami-like floodwaters.
Wow.
Upon reading the news in a German newspaper, Franz, a native Hungarian, wrote, quote, "In perhaps a fit of patriotism, this report aroused a genuine commotion within me. I felt a strange sympathy for them, and I was overwhelmed by an irresistible need to assist them in their many misfortunes. But how? I asked myself. In what manner can I help them? I, who have nothing of what makes a person omnipotent, none of the influence of wealth or the power of high societal status. Regardless, onward I shall go. I felt very strongly that neither my quiet heart nor my sleepy eyes will find rest until I am able to contribute something to relieve their great misery. I have heard of this old, powerful race of people, and I am a son of this primitive, unbridled nation for which better days are certain."
Wow. Very intense.
Isn't
I
that
like
cool?
That.
I was like,
he really is such a
"Ooh."
great writer.
And that was one of those where in the main source that I was reading through, it kind of just passes over this idea. And then I found all of these other essays and letters that Franz wrote at the time. And this was some of the stuff that I found. And it was just like, this gives such a rich idea of how he was actually feeling towards this rather than, oh, this is kind of what happened. So I loved finding this and including it.
Yeah. And he's got a good conscience too. He's like, I don't know how I can help, but I'm just going to try.
Yeah, exactly. Now, with that, he decided to pack up his things, head to Vienna, and put on a series of benefit concerts to help the ravaged Hungarian people.
This has to be one of the first benefit concerts in history.
Yup. Franz Liszt did Live Aid before it was cool.
I was about to say, like, this is like Rent or, Bohemian Rhapsody or any of that. Like, that's so
that
cool.
was Live Aid. That was when the Queen went on. And, I mean, a bunch of people did Live Aid. I mean, Black Sabbath did Live Aid. All kinds of people did Live Aid, and it was not supposedly. Well, there is debate on what whatever his name is, Jeff Gold something or other, who put on the entire thing, where they were kind of going, "What happened with all this money that you raised?" And he was like, "I gave it to Africa." What? I gave it to Africa. And they were like, "But how? Like, where did you go?" "Don't worry, bro. I gave it to Africa." There is some speculation. Don't get mad at me, people, if I'm dead wrong about that. But I have heard that there is some debate on that whole Live Aid thing. But yes, Franz Liszt
cool that he did a benefit
wanted
concert
to put on benefits to help the people of Hungary. However, it does seem that the notion wasn't completely selfless, as he would write further, quote, "Also, who knows what type of heaven's blessings will befall me for my weak offering. The hand that multiplied the manna in the desert has not weakened, maybe God delights more in the pennies of the artist than in the gold of millionaires.
Okay.
It's still cool.
Yeah, it's still cool. It's the little Bo Burnham-y where he is like, I'm going to make a difference with music, you know, a little bit.
But there is this funny thing where it's like, I'm just going to help these people. I can't sleep until I do it. Also, bonus, maybe God will be pretty stoked with me, which I think is kind of funny. Now, even though Marie knew of the devastation and ruin that thousands of Hungarians were facing, she didn't really seem to care and said to Franz, quote, others could help these people, but who will come to my aid when I am alone and sick?
Dude.
I said it in the last episode.
Yeah, you and I talked about this, just a little bit of the vibe. It's just you are completely selfish and kind of just not a good person.
Yeah, I said it in the last episode, and we'll talk about it more in this episode, but I don't like Marie de Gaulle. And this is one of those times where I'm like...
You're not taking care of your kid. You're just a rich lady in Venice. And you're
complaining about it.
What if my bonbons don't arrive at the right time? I don't understand. Who's going to fetch them for me without you? We only have 12 servants.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, other people can help them, but what if I can't find a good place to get pasta? Dude, really? That was basically where it was at, So anyway. Now, I can only imagine the blank, exhausted stare that Franz gave her before packing up his things for Vienna and leaving Marie to pout in Venice. Now, despite Franz reaching the level of stardom that he had and touring extensively around Europe, it had now been 15 years since Franz had been in Vienna. When he left, he was an adorable child prodigy, but now he was a full-on celebrity. Franz was pretty stoked to be back in Vienna, but was even more stoked when he got to reconnect with his old mentor and pseudo-brother, Karl Czerny. Remember we talked about him in the first episode? For the next 2 months, Franz put on charity concerts to raise money for the flood relief efforts in Hungary. Although he was still trying to do a good thing, the actual business of getting the concerts staged and all that kind of stuff that goes along with it was apparently pretty grueling, as he would write at the time, quote, my troubles and afflictions are endless. My days and evenings wither away, and my feet climb sky-high tall steps that scale enormous heights. The ever-necessary rehearsals are always impossible, and I've completely lost my mind. The citizens are frugal, the nobility are stingy, and furthermore, the collections for the poor and impoverished have already been exhausted. With every new, in consideration of, I must forego one less franc.
I see. So basically, he's like, I'm trying to do a good thing, but everybody wants a piece of the pie. And now, we're not going to be able to raise any money because just the cost of running this has become so exorbitant because of landlords and all of that. Well,
and so he would, go to put on a show at a certain venue, and the venue would go, well, okay, but the thing is that our wait staff, and our ushers, they expect to be having this amount paid. And also you can't just have people arriving and sitting in just any seat. We need to be specifically having these one seats for the better, people that are going to be here from higher society. So that's what I said. Every in consideration of that I have to basically appease to these other people, it's less and less money that I'm able to raise for these starving, destitute people in Hungary that have been suffering from these floods. So again, it's the actual business of putting on the concerts was pretty darn grueling.
Kind of a wash.
I mean, he was still able to raise money, but yeah, it was not great. But once all the headaches of planning the shows were sorted out, the music-loving culture of Vienna welcomed him back with open arms, now respecting him as the mind-blowing performer that he had become. When famed composer Robert Schumann's fiancée, Clara, saw Franz perform during this time, she wrote to Schumann saying, quote, you can't compare him to any other player. He stands alone. He inspires terror and amazement, but he's the most delightful person.
That's cool.
I told you from the beginning. It's he may have character issues, but everybody loved him.
Yeah.
They just thought he was the best, Now, it was also noted that Franz had begun to play with such intensity on the piano that he was now known to regularly break strings, but would carry on through the performance, making adjustments on the fly so as not to hit a key that had a broken string.
I see.
So if he was playing certain scales or whatever, he would know to skip over a certain key and then continue on with the scale without it, but he would adjust it by hitting a higher note to complete the scale.
Yeah,
Just crazy stuff.
That's so cool.
As a result of this, he started taking the stage with 3 pianos minimum in anticipation of breaking strings on all of them.
Interesting.
Needless to say, this only helped bolster the rock star image he was now basking in. It was like watching Eric Clapton break a string mid-guitar solo, but having the chops to keep the solo going regardless.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so cool.
Or like, and then after that, let me switch guitars, give one to my roadie, and then he'll give me a new one and I can keep on playing. Like that was basically how he was at this point.
Yeah, I'm also thinking mechanically, I imagine at this time, material science hasn't quite caught up to make sort of the strings that we have today. So maybe they were not quite as strong or something
Almost
like that.
Definitely.
Yeah,
almost definitely. Now, in addition, Franz was known to regularly be called back on stage 15 to 18 times to play an encore.
That's just another concert at this point. He's like, okay, if you insist. It's like, dude, it's been 4 hours.
Like teenagers with crushes wanting posters on their walls, the women of Vienna swooned over Franz too, as after a few weeks, portraits of Franz were out of stock and in high demand.
Really?
So people were literally going to artists being like, do you have any pictures of Franz? I want one for my wall. Literally like a teenager being like, I want a poster of the Backstreet Boys on my wall or whatever. It's the exact same thing.
That's so funny.
Now, as you might have guessed, Marie was not pleased to hear this news. Now, remember at the beginning of the episode, I mentioned that Franz had given up his philandering ways after meeting Marie? Well, it probably comes as no surprise that with Franz now on his own back in Vienna and with basically every woman in the city clawing after him, he soon resorted back to his old ways of amorous affairs.
Yeah, that's kind of expected.
Now, not long at all after Franz began performing in Vienna did he begin a regular routine of one-night stands and liaisons with various women, both married and single, like we've kind of mentioned before. There is even some evidence which suggests that one of Franz's affairs was with none other than Christine Belgioso, the Princess of France.
What?
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Because they maintained correspondences, and it's like, if you read the letters, it's very like, ooh, okay, this could be nothing. This could just be him being like, oh yes, your affectionate letters really mean a lot to me, but it could also be like, between the lines, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that is speculation.
This
There's
could
no
be
proof
like
of
enlightenment period for like, hey, you want to come over to my apartment?
Kinda, yeah. So again, no specific proof of that one, but there is evidence to suggest.
Once again, Michael Jackson reference. This reminds me of the time where Michael Jackson is talking with Princess Diana, and she's like kind of mad. She's like, are you going to play Dirty Diana? And Michael Jackson was like, no, I'm not going to play it on the concert that you're going to attend. That would be rude. And she's like, no, I kind of like it when you play that one. And then
I didn't know that.
Her husband comes by and they're like, what are you guys talking about? And she's like, oh, nothing. And like the whole thing's on recording. You can actually like see their mouths move as they're having this discussion.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
I've never heard that story before.
Yep.
That's pretty funny. Now, it was also not long after he started cheating on Marie that rumors of his various hookups made their way back to Marie in Venice. This would mark the beginning of the end of their relationship, as Marie simply could not tolerate it, despite being one of the very women of married status that Franz had wooed and bedded previously.
Yeah, I was just about to say, like, girl, that is how this all started. You're still married to another dude right now, actively. Like,
yes.
What is going on here?
I know. It's funny. Again, it's one of those interesting things where it's the primary source that I use is, and this is kind of how we go through things generally for everybody who's curious, is we'll have like a primary source for something that we use as the main narrative of like the way that this person's life unfolded. But we don't want to just copy somebody's work and then call it good. So we're constantly trying to find other reference points, other letters, anything that we can to possibly illuminate these things that we're already going through to kind of create our own thing. So this is one of those where, again, none of this is ever spelled out in the general primary sources that I read, but based off of letters that I've read and just kind of piecing these other things together, it just makes me, it's very funny that it's never spelled out a lot of times.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, how does Marie have a leg to stand on? Because she is literally one of these people who he wooed previously. The only difference is she was a little bit more...
he did become exclusive for a long time. But then I imagine things were not going so well between the two of them. And it's like, once again, the entire foundation, the entire basis of y'all's relationship is on cheating.
Now, I will say that...
Not to say that what he did was right.
I personally, again, there's no necessarily specific evidence to show this, but I personally am of the belief that Franz was never devoted to her exclusively when it came to intimacy.
You don't think so?
No, because I mentioned in the last episode that he became friends with George Sand and how I was like, oh yeah, that was, it was very, based off of just what I understood about George Sand and learned about her, it was a woman. She was very free-loving, very whoever I want to be with, I will go and be with. There was even a person that I talked about how he had rendezvous with named Marie Pleyel, and he used Chopin's apartment to meet up with her.
Yep.
The book initially kind of is like, oh yeah, this happened in 1835. Anyways, moving on. And then after I was reading more and more and more, I was like, wait, no, like that was when he was with Marie de Gault. That he was literally with her that time.
Gotcha. So maybe they
didn't connect the dots. And I went, oh, so wait, no, he was cheating on her this entire time.
Okay.
And I'd be surprised if he wasn't cheating on her with George Sand. And then that also lends it to being like, okay, well then as you were touring around Europe, you were probably hooking up with all kinds of people all over the place.
Probably.
I don't really buy that he was just like, oh no, I'm Marie's guy now. Like,
yeah,
I just don't.
That's fair. That's fair. So there is more moral gray on his side than previously understood. But
and that's why I've said from the very beginning, this guy was a true to form rock star. Like I just finished reading Ozzy Osbourne's autobiography, and he's open about it, and he's kind of apologizes for it or whatever. But even the first like 10 plus years of him being with Sharon Osbourne, he was cheating on her all the time.
Yeah.
And he,
there's almost an expectation at like the peak of rock stardom. There was almost this expectation of being like, you're going to be with a rocker. This is just how it goes.
This is how it is. I mean, and because Ozzy
and
would
not
talk
to say
about
that that's right, but if it's within the bounds of an open relationship where both of these people have discussed this, then that's fine. But if you're going around your partner's back, the more important part is that you're breaking a promise.
Yeah. Again, I'm not condoning the behavior, but it is one of those things, like you kind of said, especially with more, old school, let's say rock stars, right? 60s, 70s, 80s, maybe even in the 90s. It was sort of like this open secret that was like, oh yeah, this person is with so-and-so, but they're not, they are on
like
camera.
Snoop Dogg has a wife, but like there are still tons of girls in his music videos,
Right. And it's not just rock stars. I would say it's a lot of times just celebrities, huge celebrities. It's like, oh yeah, I'm with so-and-so, but I've also heard that in like Hollywood, it's this sort of like, they call it about, they phrase it as the grand old tradition of hooking up with people on set. So it was like, throughout a huge portion of time.
If you were in theater at any point in college or high school, some of that still translates.
Exactly. So again, I'm not necessarily like saying, oh yeah, it was fine, like leave Franz alone. It was like clearly he was cheating on her and she was not okay with it, and they had agreed to be in an exclusive relationship. But again, it was one of those that was like, Marie, come on, like you kind of knew this about him from the very beginning, that he just was this person and he's this sort of superstar that just hooks up with all these ladies when he can because the opportunity presents itself, and he's kind of a horn dog. So like,
yeah.
Anyway, just I'll leave it at that. Now, it was also during his time in Vienna, spurred on greatly by his resounding popularity, that Franz decided to embark on an 18-month tour of Europe. Between 1838 and 1839, Franz toured Europe, putting on concerts for crazed music fans. And just to give Akiva a little tie-in to Leonardo da Vinci, during his tour, Franz would perform in Florence, Milan, and Pisa.
Okay. Yep.
Pretty cool.
I bet you there was Medici's listening to him.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Now, Marie also began to travel around Europe, but on her own. Occasionally, the two would cross paths, and on one of those occasions, their third child would be conceived. But this time, it would be a boy.
Damn.
Daniel.
Hey, look at that.
Daniel Liszt. Now, just to make sure you're aware, their first two children were still being raised by nannies and would only see their parents on occasion. When Daniel was born in Rome on May 9th of 1839, he too was placed under the care of a wet nurse, and both Franz and Marie would not see him again until the autumn of 1841, almost 3 years later.
Jeez. That's so wild. That's so wild that you could just have a kid, go through an entire pregnancy and be like, there you go.
Yep. See you in a bit.
See ya.
But that was relatively common for wealthy people at the time. So anyhow. But just 5 months after Daniel was born, Marie finally had enough and parted ways with Franz. Sort of. So let me explain. Now, Marie was extremely jealous of Franz's exploits with women, so she figured it was only fair that she be allowed to do the exact same thing with various men.
Game's game.
Amazingly, Franz agreed that it was indeed only fair that she be allowed to have relations with other men, just as he was doing with swaths of women. Marie didn't necessarily want to leave him altogether, and Franz didn't want to leave her, so they agreed to enter into what we would call, in modern times, an open relationship.
Yeah.
No joke. In 1839, basically. 1841. No, 839, right after Daniel was born. Now, upon coming to this mutual agreement, Marie also decided it was somehow the right time to start at least pretending to be a mother. So she collected her 2 daughters, Blandine and Cosima, and together they moved back to Paris, where Marie felt most at home and probably where she felt she had the best chance of hooking up with some sexy dudes.
Yeah, probably.
But not long after arriving in Paris, did Franz decide he didn't fully trust Marie with his kids. So he arranged for all of them to move in with his mother, Anna, much to Marie's frustration. If Marie ever protested, remember, she had no legal right to her children, as she was not listed on their birth certificates. So Franz always had final say.
Really? That's wild.
He could just be like, what are you going to do? Take me to court for the children that don't belong to you? I know.
Damn.
I know, but yeah.
That's heavy.
Now, this actually ended up being the best thing possible, as Marie didn't have much instinct as a mother, and Anna was said to be a doting and loving grandmother.
I'm sure Marie loved that. I'm sure she was like, oh, yes, everybody loves my mother-in-law. That's so wonderful.
Yeah.
My mother-in-not-law.
Yeah, that's true. Now, their son Daniel would also be brought to Paris in the autumn of 1841, but it's worth noting that apparently Daniel was not treated so kindly by his caretakers, as when he arrived, he was described as skin and bones, starving, and needed to be nursed back to health by his grandmother.
What?
I know. I don't know how that happened, but yeah, they apparently whoever they left him with in Rome just like didn't take good care of him. So he was like this emaciated little kid when he was like 3 years old and got to Paris finally. So just sort of sad. Now, though Franz and Marie wouldn't fully and officially end their relationship until 1844, Franz was now 28 years old and free to live the life of a bachelor rock star. For the next 8 years, Franz would go on an absolute tear, both in terms of creativity and performing. In that 8-year period, Franz would perform more than 1,000 concerts, which averages to about 1 concert every 3 days. And his list of concert locations was equally as exhaustive. Not only did he perform in basically every city you can imagine in continental Europe, but also as far west as Ireland and as far east as Constantinople, now Istanbul, and Moscow.
Wow.
And remember, trains were barely starting to be a thing, so he was doing all of this traveling by stagecoach. In fact, like a modern-day touring musician with a roadie crew, he bought his own stagecoach with a hired driver to take him wherever he needed, whenever he needed, and in luxury. He even hired a tour manager to organize schedules and negotiate concert fees with venues.
This is just so cool. It's so crazy because I feel like obviously he's a classical musician, but he almost feels like he really should be in a rock and roll Hall of Fame. Hall of Fame.
Yes.
Yeah.
I completely agree with you because it feels like he invented what we now think of a pop star to be.
Yeah. Or just like the process of how to be that as well.
It's like, it's crazy. Just like the crazed fans, the touring schedules, your own everything. I mean, it's crazy. Now, as you can imagine, this also lent itself to all the stereotypes of rock stardom, like gaudy outfits and specific demands placed on concert venues, a la Nicki Minaj demanding a bucket of fried chicken be available in the green room of every venue she plays at.
I didn't know that, but
That's
I love
true.
that.
That's true.
I want a bucket of fried chicken.
I would.
Everywhere
I don't.
go.
I'm not mad at it. I think it's great, but I just think it's hilarious that Nicki Minaj is like, no, that's one of my requirements for every place I play at.
That's
Is you
so
have
funny.
to have fried chicken waiting for me in the green room every time. Like, rock and roll.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Now, Franz was also quite the drinker, which was his drug of choice, in addition to copious amounts of cigars. So he was, I mean, I'm not going to be like going into super hardcore detail about it, but just kind of know that like he was a drunk pretty much.
Okay.
People kind of talk about later how, and we'll get into it in the next episode, but there's kind of this theme that goes on where if somebody is not there at the piano with him going, no, keep writing, keep practicing. It was oftentimes to be like, yeah, put the drink down, start writing, start practicing. He was a drunk.
That kind of reminds me of the story with Guns N' Roses. I'm not sure if you
I don't know.
remember this, but there was a point, their most famous album, I can't remember what the name of the album is, but if you think of the album art with the cross and the skulls on the whole cross, that Guns N' Roses album was made in like the course of a weekend because their manager just could not get them to write anything. So he locked them in a hotel room and said, you cannot come out. We'll give you food. We'll give you whatever you want, but you are not leaving this until we have an album.
I've not heard that.
And apparently that's the story of how that album came out.
Crazy.
Which is very similar to being like, okay, obviously you're not going to do anything unless we get this alcohol away from you because you just clearly cannot control yourself.
It's funny that you say that. In the next episode, we're going to be talking about not necessarily the same situation, but something very, very similar. And then in terms of him creating some masterpiece kind of stuff. But yeah, we'll get there. Now, I don't know if I would go as far as to say that Franz was an alcoholic, but it definitely wasn't far off. Now, he performed in front of sultans, czars, kings, queens, you name it. Like Owen Wilson's character in Zoolander, that Franz Liszt is so hot right now. In addition to being the hottest musical act probably in the world at the time, Franz also started to revolutionize the format of concerts in many ways we would recognize today. For example, up until Franz, it was standard practice for pianos to be positioned parallel to the stage with the piano player in profile.
I see.
But Franz didn't like this. He wanted to see the audience and actually engage with them as he was performing. So he started positioning his pianos at an angle so that he could look out onto his audience during the performance. He might have even been the inventor of actually talking to the audience and telling stories in between his songs, but that's a little bit harder to prove. Franz was also the inventor of the single billed concert, meaning he performed completely alone from top to bottom. No acts playing before or after him.
Wow.
Many even say he was the sole inventor of what we would now refer to as a piano recital.
Really?
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
Now, Franz even talked about what he had created by writing, quote, "The concert is myself." Okay?
It's like, what if we made music, but it was me? It was all me.
No. Think about that for a second, okay? What he's saying is, and this is actually really profound, okay? When let's say the Rolling Stones were coming into town, or here in Denver, the Foo Fighters were just in town, right? I'm not really super into the Foo Fighters, but like I kind of would have liked to go see the Foo Fighters because I want to go see the Foo Fighters.
I see what you're saying.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right?
There's a certain gravitas around him where it's like, even if you're not a particular fan, it's like, well, I got to go see it. Like that's how Shalane and I feel about, Beyonce. At this point, I'm not a huge fan of Beyonce's newest albums, but she's Beyonce, and at some point, she's gonna stop playing music, so I have to go to one concert, right?
Same. I would say that I'm not at all a Beyonce fan, but if you were like, dude, I got a ticket to go see Beyonce, you want to go? I'd be like, hell yeah, I want to go see Beyonce.
Yeah,
because it's Beyonce.
Yeah,
that is up until Franz Liszt.
Franz is a finite resource, and that makes people want him.
It was literally they'd be like, oh, the music of Schubert is being played, and actually that Schubert is going to be playing many of his own pieces. I really want to hear his music. Franz, it was, dude, we're going to go see Franz Liszt. It's Franz Liszt. We're going to go see Franz Liszt. That's what he's talking about.
It didn't quite matter as much who he was playing, more of the fact that it was Franz Liszt playing.
Right. And so that's
cool.
why he's writing, he's recognizing it. He's like, dude, the concert it's past the music. I am the concert.
I see.
Right?
Yeah.
People are coming to see Franz Liszt play. That's the point. Right?
Ain't nobody coming to see you, Otis.
He was the first person.
Like the Temptations.
Yeah. He was the first person to do this, basically, to where people would go to see him, not just, I want to go listen to music. I cannot understand how important this is when it comes to concert going.
No,
like,
seriously.
This is insane, right? Now, things were going so well financially that Franz even started to flex his charitable muscles. In October of 1839, he caught wind that Ludwig van Beethoven's hometown of Bonn in Western Germany wanted to build a monument to the legendary composer, but were shortened funds by some 50 or 60,000 francs. Franz personally donated the money, asking for nothing in return other than being allowed to select the artist who would make the statue, which ended up being a master sculptor from Florence.
Bingo. I was about to say.
Named Lorenzo Bartolini.
Ah, there we go. I was about to say, still to this point, sculpture is Florence up until like the 19th century.
I knew you would get excited about that. That's why I had to include it.
Yeah, that's so cool.
And by the way, the Beethoven statue in Bonn, Germany, still stands to this day in a public square. So you can all go see it.
That's cool.
Neat, right?
That's really
and
cool.
You can all know if you go and see it, it was because Franz Liszt donated the money to build the statue.
Yeah, and he picked the artist.
And picked the artist to do it. Needless to say, things were going well. And in the winter of 1839, Franz was to receive a crowned jewel of honor that he would cherish for the rest of his life. At the request of some Hungarian dignitaries who had been following his success, Franz returned to his homeland. Remember, Hungary was not a country at this time, as it was still under the control of Austria, but sentiment for independence had been steadily growing. Upon returning home, Franz put on concerts in modern-day Bratislava and Pest, one concert for the elites and one concert that benefited the poor. At all of his performances, the crowds went completely nuts, especially when he played a piece called the Rákóczi March, which was the unofficial anthem of Hungary. At the conclusion of his final performance, a group of Hungarian dignitaries took to the stage with him, delivering a patriotic speech and relishing Franz with words of gratitude. At the end of their speech, they presented Franz with a sword. But not just any sword. A gorgeous, ornately crafted saber with a gold handle and sheath bedazzled from top to bottom with precious gemstones.
I want to see it.
I want me to get a picture for you really quick?
Okay. Yes. Okay. So that's a tulwar or a shamshir. This is be like Turkish or like northern India sort of area. The thing is very expensive, and I couldn't tell from over there, but that might have been Damascus as well.
I don't know if it was Damascus or not. And you can also, if you want to just get a closer look, I just showed Akiva on my computer, but if you want to get a closer look, you can also just Google Franz Liszt sword and it'll pop right up or whatever.
Yeah.
It was made in Hungary by Hungarian smiths.
Really?
So yeah, I know for a fact it was a very specific like sword that was used for the Hungarian military.
Ah, okay.
And so yeah, that was like part of the thing. I said it was very representative of Hungary. So it wasn't this like, oh, we got a sword from way over where. It was like, no, this was made by Hungarian people and presented to Franz Liszt.
Wow, it's so cool. The jewel sitting on the guard of this would be a very Eastern style blade based on what I'm looking at. We have like gold inlay across the blade. This is one of those pieces that isn't just an armament, but this is worth an estate.
It is a piece of art. And all of the precious gemstones that are inlaid into it, you're like, this is worth a fortune.
I was about to say, this isn't just a weapon. This is equity. This is old money type type stuff.
Pretty cool though, right?
Yeah, I'm digging it.
So, upon receiving the sword, Franz was overcome with emotion. I mentioned at the very beginning of this series that in Franz's childhood, he had never learned to speak Hungarian despite being born there. Something he had always regretted, as it made him feel less like a true Hungarian. But this gesture from his native people flooded him with a sense of pride that he had never felt before. It was as if, finally, he was being accepted as a true-born son of Hungary, and now he had a sword to wave around to prove it. When Franz left the venue that night, it was reported that over 10,000 people showed up to see off his carriage, and the crowds were so boisterous in their cheering that the military bands playing music around Franz's carriage couldn't even hear each other.
Wow.
So like they're trying to play celebratory music to like march him out of there, but they couldn't hear each other.
But the scream was just so intense.
It was so intense they couldn't hear each other play.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's super insane. Now, Franz wrote to Marie describing the scene, saying, quote, "It was the kind of victory parade only known to the men who fought in the French Revolution."
Wow.
This is a musician, okay? When Franz visited his birthplace, Rating, a few weeks later, he said, quote, "The children, boys and girls, knelt down as I walked past them, and it was all I could do to persuade them to get onto their feet. Some of the farmers came over to kiss my hand, but most of them maintained a respectful distance." This was the kind of hometown welcome that you dream of as a teenager, imagining you'll go off somewhere, make something huge of yourself, then come back for your high school reunion and show all the haters what a magnificent thing you've become. But knowing in your heart, it will never really happen that way. For Franz Liszt, however, it did.
Yeah, that's so cool. Very hero's journey.
It's insanely cool, man. It's one of those like, dude, rock and roll.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
Yeah. I mean, even at this time, there's deference to royalty, but to be intrinsically motivated to cheer for a person, I don't feel like was a big deal. Like, due to religious reasons, you might praise a person like the Pope or an archbishop or something like that. Due to political reasons, you have respect for your king or your queen or your, count, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But somebody just being like, I love Franz Liszt so much that when I see him come into town, I'm going to freak out and just scream my head off, ask to kiss his hand, congratulate him, thank him. That seems to be kind of a new thing that hasn't happened for a very long time.
Almost never, and sure as hell never for a musician, right?
Yes.
Maybe Beethoven, but I've never heard any stories about that before. It's pure speculation if that ever was the case. And also remember, I mean, obviously, this is way before electronics were a thing and social media was a thing. So for a town to show up, bow, kiss somebody's hand
through word of mouth
and some newspaper clippings every once in a while, but you had to know. Because I can't imagine it was this widely advertised thing. You can't Google, where was Franz Liszt born? You had to kind of know. Yeah, Franz Liszt was born in Rating, right? So all of these people, when he would come to town with this time that he showed up, it was like, not only do we know, we've been following you, and you're a hero. It's intense, man.
That's so cool.
It's so cool.
I dig it.
Now, Franz was now a giant, not only in the world of music, but high society. A goal he had set for himself after his first heartbreak when he was 16. If you remember, his first love's father had married her off to a more well-to-do man, as he didn't see Franz as upper class, right? So it always kind of been this goal of his to be like, okay, I want to show them. Now, in the early months of 1840, Franz was rubbing elbows with everyone of note, and it was around this time that he made lifelong friends with a classical composer named Robert Schumann. They didn't exactly become fast friends, as Schumann was known to be a lot more quiet than Franz, and a little more slow to trust someone. But Franz took to him pretty quickly and made strong efforts to become buds. For the past few years, Franz and Schumann had been exchanging letters professionally, as they were both mutual admirers of one another from afar, but had never met. When Franz was putting on the benefit concerts in Vienna a few years back, he had met Schumann's fiancée, Clara, who had put the two in touch. At the time, Franz was staying in Leipzig, Germany for a few months and putting on concerts, which is where the two first met. After Schumann got to know Franz and was able to see firsthand the type of lifestyle that Franz liked to live, he warned him of the gossip that local newspapers were sure to write about him. But Franz literally didn't give a fuck and went around living his best life anyways. After a few days of partying, Schumann wrote to his wife Clara and said, quote, "Throughout the whole of the last few days, There have been nothing but dinners and suppers, music and champagne, counts and beautiful women. In short, he has turned all our lives upside down. But we are all wildly in love with him. And yesterday, again, he played like a god at his concert. The excitement of the crowd was indescribable. So again, it's that rock star thing of like party all night. You're going to be waking up super hungover, and then you're like, I got to play? Oh, yeah. And then just knocking it out of the park.
Yeah.
It's just so cool. Now, Schumann was right, by the way. The newspapers took every chance they could to write about Franz's exploits, but he took it all as a point of pride and only saw it as a boost for his image. Now, though he was having a grand old time in Leipzig, there was one dark cloud that drizzled some rain on Franz's parade. The virtuoso violinist, Niccolo Paganini, died at the age of 57.
That's pretty long considering all of the sort of
illness and stuff,
comorbidities that he had.
Yeah. He had finally succumbed to his illness related to his long-time fight with syphilis in May of 1840. Though he was on his deathbed, Paganini had refused to believe it and denied a Catholic priest from administering last rites, only to die a week later. Because he was not given last rites, the Catholic Church denied his burial in a Catholic cemetery, and it would take another, you ready for this? 36 years of legal battles and appeals before his body would finally be laid to rest in Parma, Italy in 1876.
Jeez.
So he was not buried for 36 years.
I mean, and also it's not because he wasn't Catholic or anything. It was because he didn't think he was going to die.
And he refused his last rites. He was like, no, I'm going to get better. I'm going to get better. And the Catholic priest was like, okay, fine. And then left Paganini alone. And then he died a week later. And the Catholic Church was like, sorry.
You said you were fine, but you weren't.
Yeah, you didn't get your last rites from us. So like, it's just so ridiculous.
Wow.
During that 36-year period, his body was never buried. Of his death, Franz would write, quote, Paganini's flame of life is now extinguished. With it, a wonderful spirit disappeared, and now it remains only as a spark in the sphere of art. But what a particularly great spark it was. Paganini thrived with a talent that exceeded the highest height of all obtainable perfection. Other than God, what power manifests itself within the human soul to produce such a priestly genius? I say without hesitation, a second Paganini will never rise from the dead.
Wow. That's so cool.
Goosebumps.
I love picturing them as sort of foils of one another, but still liking one another. It's like the golden retriever and the black cat sort of vibes between the two. One's very gaunt and serious, and he's the devil's violinist. And the other one is like this rock star is like, hey, everyone. And like,
I honestly,
everybody's like, oh my God, Franz.
I kind of see it as like the Beatles versus the Stones.
Yes.
Right? Where it was like the Beatles were like, well, everybody loves the Beatles. And then there's all these other people that were like, or maybe even a better comparison would be like the Beatles versus the Doors.
Mm-hmm.
Where it was like the people that like the Doors were like, no, it's just darker and more mysterious and more like, have you listened to the lyrics, bro? It's just they're more poetry.
Yeah.
And like that was sort of Paganini's like whole persona, and Franz Liszt was this just like virtuoso, boisterous, hello everyone, yay! Like
yes,
kind of a thing. So it's just like, yeah, very, very interesting. Two sides of a different coin kind of a thing.
I like picturing them in my head.
Now, after he had finished up his concerts in Leipzig, Franz headed back to Paris for a short time to say hi to Marie and the kids before heading to England, which he had now set his sights on as his latest musical conquest. And maybe a few other conquests, if you catch my drift.
Ho, ho, ho.
I'm sorry, I had to. Marie, by the way, did say she missed Franz, but was seemingly having a pretty grand old time in Paris, as apparently loads of dudes were lining up to get with her, and as she and Franz were now in an open relationship, she wasn't exactly lonely or sleeping in a cold bed, wink, wink. This was, again, no problem for Franz, as he was enjoying the same lifestyle. But like I said moments ago, he had now set his sights on England, and between 1840 and 1841, he took 3 trips there to put on concerts and rub elbows with the elite. He departed Paris on May 5th of 1840, headed for the coast in order to cross the English Channel. As his carriage clopped its way through the French countryside, he approached the small French village of Beauvais. To the horror of both Franz and all of the townsfolk of Beauvais, the entire village was engulfed in flames.
What?
There was nothing anyone could do but sit and wait for the fire to die down. Within hours, the entire village was reduced to ash. Though Franz didn't know it, this would be an omen of things to come in England.
Ooh.
Once Franz had crossed the English Channel, he commenced with his tour of what he called the Four Kingdoms just 2 days later, and that's what it was kind of known as at the time.
Gotcha.
The English, like everyone else who saw him perform, were instantly blown away as he was invited to play in front of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert at Buckingham Palace.
Queen Victoria.
But then, the British press did what they often do to new musicians on the scene that they don't fully understand. For the first time in his life, Franz was getting bad reviews.
Really?
The English newspapers said he wasn't a true artist, only a parlor trick on the piano, and they especially didn't like his whole rock star attitude. It reminds me of when the Beatles first hit the scene. Many music publications and newspapers sung their praises, but many others dismissed them, making fun of their haircuts, their outfits, and saying they weren't real musicians, at least not true musicians like jazz artists.
I see.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Now, weird little sidebar, but I'm also currently reading, and this is actually out of date, because I finished reading the autobiography of Ozzy Osbourne, who probably could have given Franz some good advice around this time. In his book, Ozzy writes, quote, "I'll never bother with reviews. Whenever I hear someone getting upset about reviews, I say to them, look, it's their job to criticize. That's why they're called critics."
Yeah. Yeah.
So Ozzy has said he's never read reviews because he's like, I just don't care.
Simply put.
I don't want to know because that's what they do. They criticize. So leave it alone. But still, Franz was hurt. Marie came out to stay with him in London for a few weeks, but she was never able to get over her jealousy of Franz's relations with other women, so she was apparently pretty mean to him the whole time. After they returned to Paris in July of 1841, Franz took some time to lick his wounds, but returned to England again in November after being offered a touring gig with some other musicians at the eye-watering price of 37,000 francs.
Ay, ay, ay.
And that converts to about $236,000 in today's currency. Now, he definitely needed the money, as his lifestyle was expensive, and he was constantly giving away to various charitable causes. The tour was going so well that they doubled its length, and all told, Franz played more than 80 concerts in a 3-month stretch, and traveled some 3,500 miles in total. But unfortunately for Franz, the organizer of the tour turned out to be a bit of a crook and declared bankruptcy just as the tour was coming to an end. So not only did Franz not get paid, he actually lost an estimated 43,000 francs, which converts to about $275,000.
Oh my God.
In today's currency.
Wow.
Which is, again, one of those weird things where it's like, this also feels reminiscent of like tours and stuff that happened in the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s
like
and stuff.
Rihanna,
like,
you remember the song Bitch Better Have My Money? That was about one of her financial advisors just taking a bunch of money off the top.
Yeah. That was this, and that was sort of like, so the guy was like putting on this whole concert tour, taking all this money, using it, and at the end was like, oh, I have no money anymore. I'm going to clear bankruptcy. Sorry, guys, I can't do it. And just like walked away from all of it.
Don't walk away from me. Where the fuck is my money?
Yeah, dude. So pretty lame. Now, a few months later, probably out of pride, Franz returned to England once again to see if he could at least win over audiences and make a few bucks in the process. But his efforts were again unfruitful. He wrote to Marie during his final days in London saying, quote, "I shall earn no money in London this season. This really is the strangest situation that one can imagine. I lack a theater or a salon in which to appear on a regular basis. But no one is doing anything about it, or indeed can do anything about it."
That's so weird because,
I know.
I mean, we're thinking about lifetime concerts at this point. He's in the thousands, truly in the thousands.
I know.
And now he's not even able to get booked.
England just didn't respond to it. They were just like, nah, we're good. Like, it's not our thing. It's not emotional enough or whatever. You're just like, you're a piano trick and that's about it. And that was it. And he was so disappointed that he would not return to England for another 45 years. Probably for good reason, if you ask me. Now, throughout this time, the relationship between Franz and Marie was continuing to strain. Though the two had agreed on being in an open relationship, Marie just couldn't get into it and was constantly fighting her own jealousy. Franz was the most popular musician in the world right now and had the good looks to go along with it, so he was living the life of a true rock star. Marie was doing all right with the men in Paris, but if I was to get on Marie's side for just a second, I think she was a woman who wanted to be loved, not just lusted after.
I see.
So she loved Franz, and more than anything else, she wanted him to truly love her back. The two would play the game of Ross and Rachel for another 3 years before they would finally throw in the towel. But it seemed to have been a particularly dramatic and emotionally draining time for Marie. In that 3-year period, she would threaten to fully end their relationship several times, at one point even writing to Franz saying, quote, "I cannot take it anymore. I feel incapable of living in this state of perpetual agitation. Let us cease our sad deliberations, and let me withdraw from these touching tokens of your affection, which spring up beneath your feet in such numbers. I shall make a better friend than I ever was a lover. I know only that I am suffering, and that I shall always make you suffer if I remain. Farewell, Franz. This is not a break, but an adjournment. In 5 or 6 years from now, we shall both laugh at the torment that I am suffering today. Adieu."
Well, that was very composed. That was very polite of her. And I kind of understand where she's coming from now. You know, you saying that she just wanted to be loved, and it's not her fault that Franz was the person that she wanted to love her.
Yep.
That kind of makes sense.
I know, and that was why
she's looking for love in all the wrong places.
Right. And I've said, I don't really like Marie, and I don't. And we're in the next episode, we're going to have a few other little examples of me just being like, ugh, I just don't really care for this person. But again, to get on her side for a second, it does make sense that if that's what she was just looking for, is being like, it's not just I thought you were great, but like I wanted you to love me and love me so much that you didn't want anybody else. You weren't even tempted by anybody else because of how much you loved me. And Franz was like, I do love you, but that girl over there is really hot. Like,
yeah.
I can see how that would break my heart.
Yeah,
I'm not that kind of person. You know what I mean? So like, I get where she's coming from, probably to that extent, if that was in fact how she was feeling.
For sure.
Now, though their true breakup was yet to come, Franz was about to enter into the most exciting and celebrated time of his career. He was about to leave Paris for a tour of Germany, which would ignite a raging fire of hysteric fandom, the likes of which the world had never seen before. Franz was about to become even bigger as a musician than anyone ever thought possible, putting on concerts that drove such devotion in fans that some said he was controlling their very heartbeats as he played, which caused them to get lightheaded and nearly pass out. Like Elvis Presley over a century later, women would want him and men would want to be him. Such was the insanity of his upcoming superstardom that history would come to describe the hysteria as Liszt-o-mania.
I thought you were going to say it. I'm so excited. Controlling the very heartbeats.
And that's where we'll pick back up for part 4.
I should have expected that.
Of Franz Liszt. If I'm being very honest, there were times that I added more of a quote than I wanted to, because I was like, I really want to end this episode with teasing at Liszt-o-mania.
Yeah.
Like, I really want to get to that point and then get to the next episode or whatever. But yes, I also said it at the very beginning of this entire series in episode 1. If anybody ever listened to the band Phoenix and heard the song Liszt-o-mania, this is literally where that term comes from, is the popularity that was surrounding Franz Liszt. So hopefully you can kind of see how this has been building so far, where it's like, yes, he's getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. It is about to explode to a point where, like,
I really don't know how it could get any bigger. I mean, we're getting to a point where people are screaming, people who are, possibly even illiterate are still going to see this guy and have singular devotion over a person, not because they're a religious symbol, not because they're a political symbol, but because of their art and their skill, and really just their brand recognition is the best way to put it, because they're Beyonce, you know?
Now, I'm going to give some examples of not only what fans were starting to do once he gets into that phase, that'll be in the next episode, but I'm also going to paint some comparisons for artists that are similar that, and you can think of them on your own, I'm sure, where you go, oh yeah, there was a point in time where whatever artist is in your head right now was like, they were popular. People, they had a big following. People would go crazy at their concerts. I've been to their concerts. People would go nuts at them. And then something happened where now they've surpassed being a popular musician. They are a living legend, right? Yeah. That's kind of what happens with Listomania, where it's like, he goes past just being like, oh, the best, most popular musician in the world to being like, dude, it's fucking Franz Liszt, man. Like it's I can't explain it. It ups that notch to where it's like, I don't think people even saw him as a human. He was Franz Liszt. He was this icon. Yeah, that's the best way to say it. It was like, he almost took over part of the culture.
Jackson 5, Michael Jackson versus bad Michael Jackson.
Or, I mean, even I would say even something like Thriller, right? Where it was like Michael Jackson was very, 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 very popular. But man, when Thriller came out, it's like the world turned upside down for this album.
And
you know what I mean?
There's no way that you're going to go through the month of October without hearing Thriller play once.
Totally.
There's no way.
Totally.
Whether you're going to a grocery store or, going through Home Depot, it's going to play because he's still such an icon.
Or I think even a good example, and I don't bring this up in the next episode, this is probably a good one to bring up, but Elvis Presley, obviously huge musician, massive, crazed fans, all the stuff. But at the later part of his career, when he had his residency in Las Vegas, Elvis was past Elvis at that point. Do you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. He was this just like, dude, it's Elvis.
Yeah.
It's he's a musician, I guess. It's Elvis, right? He's a merchandising powerhouse.
I think Beyonce is really a fantastic example because Beyonce's music, some of it is, and she'll be completely honest about it, some of it is written by other people, that type of thing. But if you remember when the Coachella recording of Beyonce hit Netflix that year, just a couple of years ago, that was a sensation. Seeing the choreography, seeing the performance, the story being told. I think if anybody had any doubt as to whether or not Beyonce was a brand first and a person second, or a brand first and a musician second, that year, or maybe even Lemonade, if we're being more specific, Lemonade and the Coachella performance kind of set that into a foundation where it's not just the music anymore. It's not just, oh yeah, she was in Destiny Child. I remember Destiny Child. Oh yeah, she had those good songs back in the 2000s, and like some of those were really good. It's like it's Beyonce.
See, I would personally put it at Single Ladies, where it was like prior to Single Ladies, yeah, dude, Beyonce was a big name. She was really huge and everything like that. But it was like when Single Ladies came out, it was like everybody, right? I don't care who you are. I don't like country music, but I will get down to Friends in Low Places.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
It was the same thing for Beyonce, where it was like, yeah, okay, yeah. I mean, you kind of have to like hip hop kind of a thing. I dare you to find
somebody who can't at least do the chorus for Single Ladies.
But when Single Ladies comes on, I'm just like, I don't care who you are.
Up. Yeah.
This is a bop, man.
It's a bop.
And I'm like, I'm loving it. And
the hand twisting and
all of it. It's a great music video too.
Yeah, it was a great.
And Kanye was right. I'm sorry to say, but of the few things Kanye was right about, she should have won Best Music Video instead of Taylor Swift, whatever she did that year.
Yeah, that was the sign of a darker time.
Yeah.
He predicted that like Nostradamus before he lost his mind.
Yeah, that's probably the only times you'll hear me say Kanye was right, but he was right about that. I will tell you right now.
That's true.
But anyhow, that's kind of where we're going with Franz Liszt. It's like, yes, popular musician, but I don't know what exactly happens. There just was this fever pitch that started to happen where he went past that, like Beyonce releasing Single Ladies, and it was like, holy hell, this is insane, right?
Yeah.
So much so that they coined this term Listomania because, and we'll, again, I don't want to give it all away. We'll get into more of it in the next episode. So
I'm so excited, man. Great job.
Thank you. So that'll do it for this episode. A couple little things we always like to plug at the very end, like always. Again, if y'all are enjoying the show so far, again, would obviously humbly ask for your support on our Patreon.
Yes, it would be wonderful. If you feel like this contributes to your life in a positive way, I can guarantee you are probably paying for things that don't contribute to your life in a positive way. So that would be my argument. I'm not much of a subscription guy. I understand that. But that would be my argument as to why the Patreon would be of value to you.
I would say if I was to emotionally manipulate you at all, I would say, hey, maybe don't go to Taco Bell once this month. and maybe just give us a little support here.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you could convince. I'm sorry, but if I wasn't in this podcast and someone's like, don't go to Taco Bell once.
Don't go to Taco Bell. No, I'm out.
Yeah, I know that there's at least 500 people who listen to that who immediately tuned out, and one of them is going to be me. But I understand what you're saying. Yeah, we pay for stuff all the time that we don't want to pay for. Oh my God, I have to pay for this subscription. I haven't gone to this gym in like 3 months. Well, this is something that you're probably listening to on a weekly basis, and you're probably learning something that you didn't know. So
yeah, and that was like, I've said this before on the podcast, but that's always been my intention with the show here is I listened to so much true crime and was like, this is great. I still listen to it, but I don't usually ever want to tell anybody about what I learned on a true crime podcast.
Yeah, it's like, and then he dissected the bodies and tore her apart. Yeah.
Right. Do you know what Jeffrey Dahmer did with that penis? It was pretty gross. Like, it's just not fun a good conversation, But hopefully you're able to go and talk to your friends and family and be like, dude, have you heard about this guy Franz Liszt? This was insane.
Yeah.
And what he actually contributed to the world of music as we know it today, even from what I've just told you so far, pretty darn fascinating. Anyway.
Yeah, I would humbly argue that adds value to your life.
I would hope so. But anyway, I'll shut up about it. You guys can decide if you want to support us or not.
Course.
So hopefully you can. But again, that's patreon.com/thebiographers. Kind of the same spiel for you on our upcoming Kickstarter here. That's just going to be Patreon. Kickstarter.com/profile/thebiographers. And that one actually will have incentive tiers. So posters, signed posters, stickers, hats.
If the podcast's not enough for you, we'll get you some stuff too. Some real physical stuff.
Exactly. So, and then Akiva is even talking about potentially doing some knives as an incentive for the Kickstarter as well. So that actually leads me nicely into the next segue, which is go check out Akiva's website. That is just going to be metalworkbymiola.com, MEOLA, for all of your chef's knives needs and probably most custom metalworking needs as well. Anything you want to say about it?
Yeah. Like I said, we have all sorts of fun, cool stuff on the website. I will hopefully be adding some stuff soon. Most importantly, with this new schedule, I would humbly ask that if you want something, reach out for a custom order. And if you want to learn knife making and you live in Colorado, I teach at Hardy and Fuller in Denver. I also do one-on-one classes for people who already have some experience in knife making. If you've already taken a couple of those classes and you really like it, come reach out to me. We'll do sort of an apprenticeship type thing.
And that's how Akiva and I became friends.
Exactly.
So again, go check out his website, metalworkbymiola.com. You can use the code biographers at checkout. You can get 10% off your order there. Last couple things. We are on social media all over the place. So TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, go find us there. Most of the time, it's just going to be at the biographers. If you're looking for us and searching for us, with the exception of Instagram, that is the.biographers. But again, go check us out there. And if you're all able to, subscribe to us on YouTube, that's always going to help as well, because once we get to a certain amount of followers, we can monetize and make more money and all that good stuff. Anything else?
I don't think so. I think we covered it pretty well.
Cool. Well, that'll do it for us for this episode again. Hopefully y'all are enjoying the series so far. I'm thinking we have 2 more episodes. No, 3 more episodes to go. 4, 5, and 6. It's possible it might bleed over into a 7th. I'm kind of figuring it out right now and polishing it up. But it's looking pretty good. I don't want to get too exhaustive on it and make you all bored. So I'm going to try to see if I can get it into a nice 6-part series to make you all sort of more interested in everything.
Yeah. Keep it tight.
Yeah. So that'll do it for us today. Like I always say at the end of our shows here, remember everyone, ignorance is not stupidity. It is the absence of knowledge. And I do hope you all learned something today.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to The Biographers. For more information, please visit thebiographerspodcast.com.